Can you just smell them? Okay, maybe not yet, but we're gonna get there soon. Hi everyone, Erin from the Impatient Gardener here, and today I'm going to tell you how to grow sweet peas. So just to be clear, the sweet peas that I'm talking about are the annual sweet peas. The botanical name is Lathyrus odoratus. The odoratus tells you right away these have a fabulous scent. These are different as well from the perennial type of sweet peas you might have heard of, or the sweet peas that you would eat. These are inedible plants. I'm also sort of coming at this from the perspective of a person who likes to grow these in my garden. So I'm not growing these for exhibition. I'm not growing these specifically for cut flowers. So there's a few differences in how you would grow them if you're growing them for those other purposes. And there's probably some differences in the varieties that you might choose. But I'm just going for pretty plants in the garden, basically. Now, sweet peas are a vine. They grow about 6 feet tall for most varieties. There are some varieties that are shorter or have a different growth habit, but generally speaking, we're talking about a vining plant. Sweet peas are also one of the plants that I think you will find more different ways to grow. Part of that is because it changes depending on what kind of climate you're growing these in. But rather than be confused by all the different information on how to grow sweet peas, I think you should take heart in it and take solace in the fact that that just means that there's a lot of ways to grow sweet peas and it's hard to screw it up. So where can you grow sweet peas? The answer is most places. Technically, they'll grow in a zone 2 to 11, but the thing that you need to know about sweet peas more than anything else is they don't like heat. So if you are in an area that gets quite hot, it's important to grow these in seasons where it's cooler because they're just going to fry out if they get too hot. They will not be happy in that scenario. So if you are in zone 8 or up, this is probably something you're actually going to start in fall. And fall planted sweet peas tend to be very strong plants once they get going. So it's really a great option. If you're in zone 6 or cooler, this is something you want to start from seed about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost. And if you're in that zone 7 range, you might have to play around with it and see which way works best for you. Because it just depends. Now, if you're going to start these in a warmer zone, you just want to make sure that if you're planting them out, you're planting them out in a place where the ground doesn't freeze, because that doesn't work. It can get cool, they can handle a pretty good frost, but they can't be in a place where the ground freezes. And you can consider a situation where you would start them in pots and then put them in a cold frame so that they didn't freeze, and then plant them in late winter or very early spring in the ground. So there are a lot of variations on the when of planting sweet peas that are very dependent on your zone. So you might have to play around to see what's best for you, or even better yet, sort of talk to gardeners in your zone who grow them, who will be happy to share their information on when you should be thinking about starting your sweet peas. Okay, so the other thing to know about sweet peas is that they do not like root disturbance. So you want to look for something to grow them in that is very deep. Now, some people use toilet paper rolls. I've personally never done that. I've heard great success stories, and I've kind of heard some horror stories about the toilet paper rolls falling apart really quickly. Personally, these days, I grow them in what is called a root trainer, and I like a very deep root trainer. I think this is probably like a 7 or 8 inch deep root trainer. And the cells themselves, there are 4 in here, are not that big at the top, but they're quite deep. And these open up like this. And so what's nice is that when it comes time to plant out your sweet peas, you just open this up. It's not like you have to pry these out or push these out. They just lay flat in there, and you pick the whole thing up and you just kind of gently slip it into the soil. So I like root trainers, but before I used root trainers, I used 4-inch pots. And it's not so much the width of the pot that you're worried about, you're more worried about the height of the pot, because again, you want a deep area for roots to get into. And that worked just fine. This was just an easier way for me to grow more of them in less space, and so that's why I switched to root trainers. Now, undoubtedly, if you've ever looked into growing sweet peas, you've probably heard all kinds of things about soaking them or nicking them. And that's because they are like tiny little, always trying to find a way to show you guys seeds. They are tiny little like pellets almost. They're very, very hard. And they're just little balls. They're a pretty big seed actually in terms of seed, but they're quite hard. And so they have this seed coat that you need to get through. So I did an experiment many years ago, maybe the second or third year I was growing sweet peas, to see whether it was worth all this fuss. And I took the same variety of sweet peas, I soaked some, I nicked some, and I did nothing to others, and then I planted them in exactly the same conditions. This is not a scientific study. It was literally 3 pots, you know. But it was anecdotal for me. And what happened was they all germinated at exactly the same time. So root trainers come in like a cage, and that props them all up to hold them upright while you're growing in them. And so once you've got seeds planted in there, it's very hard to like pull some out and not others. And so a couple of years ago, I had a situation in which one of the varieties that I planted, none of them germinated. It was just a bad batch. And when I got replacements for it, I wanted them to catch up with the rest of them. And so I pre-sprouted them because I wanted to avoid this germination problem again. And so that's now what I do for my sweet peas. And all I do is layer my sweet peas between damp paper towel. So I just take little pieces of paper towel, get them wet in the sink, wring them out, and then I just layer them up. And of course, label, and we're going to get into how important labeling is here in a second. And then they sprout, and they sprout super quick. In fact, the reason why I have many of the sweet peas already in this tray planted is because I forgot how quickly they sprout, and I really needed to get them moving on before I had time to make this video. So they will sprout in about 3 days in most cases, but I layer them up, and I have many varieties here. Layer them up, put plastic wrap over the top, and I just keep this on the kitchen counter. I don't put it on top of heat mat or anything. It seems plenty warm there. And what happens is that you get a seed that looks like this. So the first thing you're gonna see when your seeds pre-sprout is a little white wiggly thing. That's the root. Then the next thing that comes up is actually the sprout. And this one, and you can tell because it gets a little green on the tip, so it's pretty easy to tell what's what. So this is beyond when I should have planted it. So when they're at this stage, that's about when you want to move these onto pots. So just the little white tail coming out, which is your roots. So whether you're planting in 4-inch pots or root trainers or toilet paper rolls, just use regular potting mix for this one because like all vines, they're hungry, they develop roots quickly. They are a thick enough root on them that they don't have little fine roots that have to get through a really finely sieved seed starting mix. So a regular potting mix will do fine. So I am going to just fill up this last root trainer so we can talk about how to plant these. Plant your sweet peas about 1 inch deep. Use whatever you need, a pencil, a bamboo stick. I happen to have a cocktail stir because that's what happens when you're planting in your kitchen. And poke a couple of holes in your mix. You want to be very careful when you're handling these seedlings when you're using this pre-sprouting method, because if you break off either one of these, it's pretty much shot. So you do have to be real gentle with it, and that is probably the main negative of pre-sprouting these. And if you bury that little seed head, that's fine. So these are 2 seeds that were in there that have been soaking now for a week and are showing no signs of germinating. So if I hadn't pre-sprouted these would still be sitting in those pots. So that's the benefit, is you know that they are gonna work. When I do my labels for sweet peas, because I grow a lot of different varieties, I always write the color on it as well, so that I have an idea what color it's gonna be, because the names mean nothing to you unless you remember what color they are. Now you can direct sow sweet peas as well, and that would be basically as soon as you can work your soil. I like to plant these ahead of time because I like to get a jump on the season, and it's really about when they're going to grow best. So if you're in a warmer zone and you're sort of fighting the heat, you're probably going to want to start them ahead of time and then plant them out because they'll have more growing time to get flowering before you get so hot. Here it's actually just a matter of our growing season being kind of short, and I'm sort of impatient. Go figure that way. So I like to just plant them ahead of time, but direct sowing is an option. So they do not need light to germinate. In fact, they don't want light to germinate, which is why they're planted an inch deep. So they don't need to go under lights until you start seeing sprouts coming through the soil. Then you get them under lights. Now I am not going to thin these seedlings out. This whole thing will get planted out, and if I were planting these in 4-inch pots, same thing, I would leave those 3 seedlings all in that pot and plant them out as one rather than trying to separate those. When these get to be about 6 inches tall, you're going to want to pinch them back. I usually pinch them back to about 2 sets of leaves, and then you'll get some branching going on, so that will help bulk them up. You'll have more flower stems so that you will have more flowers, because that's what we want out of these, right? You can plant these out in your garden before your last frost date because, like I said, they can handle a bit of frost. So usually you want to see how you can get your soil worked, and then if your soil feels icy cold, I mean, that's too soon. But it can go out earlier than some flowers can. These grow really quickly though, so don't push these too early. In fact, I am starting these about 2 weeks earlier than I normally would, just so that I can make this video to be applicable to the most number of people who are out there trying to start these this year. So you do want to prepare the soil before you plant these out, and that's going to be working in a good amount of well-aged manure or homemade compost, because you want a really nice rich soil, but you don't want bad drainage. Bad drainage will not treat these well either. So make sure you have good drainage, but also work in a lot of organic material for these to feed off of, and also to keep their roots cool and moist. You're also going to need to provide something for these vines to climb up. So I just use bamboo canes, but you could use netting or a fence or some sort of mesh, whatever system you like. If you use bamboo canes, when you plant them out, you want to tie them in just to keep them pointing in the right direction. After they get about a foot tall, they sort of become self-supporting because they have tendrils that will hang on to each other and onto the canes. So they'll sort of do their own thing, but you do have to keep them going in the right direction or else they'll flop. Now, there are a couple of enemies of sweet peas, mainly slugs and rabbits in my experience. So by keeping those vines going upright, the slug damage is limited. If you let them sort of lay over on the soil, you could have an issue with slugs if that's a problem where you are. And rabbits will eat them, particularly when they're young. I feel like later on they don't seem to care as much, although you never know with a rabbit. But you do want to protect the base of these from rabbits because they can do a lot of damage on these. You can grow sweet peas in pots. A bigger pot will be better, so that you'll have plenty of soil volume in there and you'll keep those roots a little bit cooler. But no matter where you're growing these, you're going to want to fertilize and you're going to want to water. You want these to have really consistent water. Don't let them dry out. That'll be pretty much the end of them. In terms of fertilizing, you're going to want to fertilize the seedlings once you get maybe like 2 leaves on there. I don't have firm rules for these things. I just kind of go with it. But you're going to want to give these a dilute fertilizer. I always say that I like a fish fertilizer or a seaweed fertilizer, something like that, just to give them a little bit of nutrition. I would say feed them when they're seedlings, feed them maybe every 2 weeks or so. And same once you get them in the ground. You're going to want to feed these throughout the season, preferably with some sort of kind of mild organic feed. And then the best part about sweet peas is that in order to grow them well, it is compulsory that you pick them. And I'm not kidding about that. As soon as sweet peas start going into seed production mode, they stop flowering, or flowering really falls off. So you prevent that by continuing to pick these. And so what I end up with in summer is little posies of flowers, because I'll go out, at least once a week you want to pick them, but it's probably more like every 3 days. I will go out there and just pick all the flowers, and then I bring them in and I make a little bouquet. And I assure you, if you have never smelled the scent of a sweet pea, I think you would be hard-pressed to find too many other flowers that smell better, and it makes your whole house smell great. So a quick note about varieties. I'm not going to get into a lot of the variations of varieties. There are old-fashioned varieties, which often have better scent, and then there's Spencer varieties, which were really developed for larger flowers and longer stems, often used for cut flowers or exhibition. I grow a little bit of everything. Honestly, all I care about is just having sweet peas. So it doesn't matter to me too much how they look. I just want them to have that scent and be beautiful. And I buy individual varieties because I like to have a variety of colors, and then I plant all the hot colors together and the cool colors together and play with it that way. But you will often find sweet peas sold in sort of a collection. So it'll be a pastel collection or a bright colored collection. So if you're not fussy about the specific variety, buying a collection, there's nothing wrong with that. They'll have some great varieties in there, and then it'll just be a little bit of a surprise of what comes up, exactly what comes up. Because I'm growing so many different varieties, I don't even know how many. I'll just put a list in the description for you in case you're curious about what varieties I'm growing this year. If you're interested in finding out more about the different varieties of sweet peas, I'm going to put a link to a video in which it's a lecture given by a sweet pea breeder who really discusses the differences in the different kinds, which might be helpful to you. But like I said, I'm just happy if I have sweet peas. So that's it. I mean, really, there isn't that much to it. Remember, you want to keep them cool. They want sun. They want a lot of food. They want moist roots. And then remember to pick them all the time. That's the basic rules of sweet peas. So leave a comment, let me know if you're planning on growing sweet peas this year, and then make sure you like and subscribe because of course we'll plant these out and you guys will see these throughout the summer so you can see how these exact sweet peas look in, I don't know, maybe 5 months or so. All right, have a great day in your garden. Bye-bye.